Ah, the two-person act, a current staple of Dragon Ball. But how has the Universal Destruction dealie played a part in that? Hey guys, MasakoX here. The Tournament of Power has, and will probably go on to be, one of the most thought-provoking and memorable arcs throughout the entire Dragon Ball franchise. Yet, ultimately has very little consequence because we know the outcome of it going forward, because, you know, the whole end of Z and all that. Nonetheless, it actually contains quite a lot of potential things that go into a Dragon Ball thing. In fact, some of the best scenes throughout the entirety of Dragon Ball come when two characters have to band together in order to actually beat a common foe. They bounce off of each other when they wouldn't have before, and it produces some really interesting and unique character interactions. The Tournament of Power is no different. From that, we got some interesting pairings, not only hostile or friendly, but we even got some weird ones. First up, Goku and everyone. For the longest time, it was pretty cut and dry. Throughout the entire arc, Goku's relationship with everyone else that wasn't in Universe 7, well actually if you think about it, pretty much most people in Universe 7, thought that Goku was the absolute menace, a threat. He was the one to blame, which made him an easy target for all concerned, especially for the likes of Universe 9, and we all know how well that worked out for them. But over time, this animosity towards Goku became less and less important, and instead, the whole thing about universe survival became more apparent as universes were being erased. Universe 9 was kind of the turning point, their erasure, when everyone thought, well, okay, it's easy to blame Goku, but really, we just gotta try and hang in there. But what was really intriguing is that some of the stronger fighters throughout all the different teams actually somewhat started to respect Goku for his strength and power. Ultra Instinct was a game changer for Goku's status, especially when it comes to the Kais and the Angels and Whis and Beerus. And this may or may not be connected with the Grand Priest's fondness of Universe 7. Next up, Goku and Vegeta. Now, not really much has changed with the Kakarot-Vegeta relationship. In fact, some people could argue that it's actually gone backwards throughout this arc. After everything they've been through, they still refuse to work together as one cohesive unit. It has improved slightly over the last few episodes when they've had to try and figure out against Jiren, but with Vegeta just saying, "Don't order me around, Kakarot!" it's really making you think, are they ever gonna work together? You would think that after so many years of cooperation, almost 2 decades in fact, that they would actually try and figure out a way to work together to some degree, even if it's not really teamwork in the traditional sense, but no. Yes, granted, Saiyans think that they can work on their own, that they don't need help, and I think that's reflected with Goku and Vegeta. They think that they're strong enough to actually handle the situation on their own, but there were so many times throughout the arc and throughout the Jiren fight in particular that they needed to have both of them on the same page, working at the same time in order to try and best the big alien glorious space alien booty one big. If the Saiyan gentlemen actually decided to aid one another, the whole tension surrounding this arc would have seemed less artificial. But I do have hope though, because at the end of Z, you can really see Goku and Vegeta becoming firm friends, and they actually really like each other's company. So there is some potential for it to change in the last few episodes of Super. Then we have Goku and Khalifa, and yeah, this is the new one. And while this whole relationship is kind of similar to the Kaba Vegeta one, I think that this has actually progressed a little bit more, having skipped the formal step. And no shippers, that's not what I had in mind. Yes, and trying to find Google images of Goku and Khalifa in the same image is kind of taxing to try and find. I don't suggest you go looking for it. I'm referring to the mentor-student attitude that Goku had towards Khalifa, and how she kind of reminded him of him. And by extension, you could throw Kale and Kefla into the mix as well. Khalifa is loudmouthed, energetic, and disrespectful. The perfect kind of student for Goku because he's basically the same thing. And even though Goku's a little bit selfish, it does remind us for the fact that Goku is a pretty good teacher when he applies himself to it. Maybe the whole situation with Goku training Khalifa in order to actually unlock Super Saiyan 2 might have been the catalyst in order to get him to actually try and find a new student in the form of Oob. This could actually be some indirect foreshadowing. Only time will tell though, but one thing I really hope for is that post-Super, and if we go to Universe 6 again, that we see Goku and Khalifa actually get to talk and train with one another when it's not against the clock. Then Goku and Roshi. Now, I've got to admit, The whole moment when Goku burst into tears of relief when Roshi survived, that was a really strange outpouring of emotions for the Saiyan, didn't you think? For someone who's seen a lot of death and injury and losing people in some way, even if it's an enemy, to see him react in this way is just so unusual. But don't get me wrong, it's good writing and it's so refreshing to see Goku realize that things kind of have consequences. Roshi could have died. This might be the last time that he'd get to see one of his oldest masters. Because really, deep down, Roshi is his last remaining father figure. This was such a huge thing for both of them because for the longest time, Roshi had been relegated to the sidelines as a comic relief slash cringe relief type thing, and then you go like, oh, Roshi, stop it. Thankfully though, that seems to no longer be the case because Roshi's turned a corner in terms of his personality and also his strength. I think this is one of the rare cases of our main character and protagonist actually being aware of the surroundings around him, that he's aware of what's going on. So that's pretty much Goku there. He's gotten on with quite a lot of people and developed some kind of relationships, most of them pretty interesting. But there is one that I've had to talk about, and even though he doesn't really get represented that much, it's still pretty important, and that is Vegeta. He either avoids his teammates other than Goku, or he treats them diplomatically, like quite neutrally. I mean, except for the likes of Frieza, but can you really blame him? But luckily for us, there is one interaction worth talking about. Vegeta and Kaba. While we have seen many times that Vegeta can be really harsh towards Kaba, we have also seen at the same time that he does respect the young Saiyan from Universe 6. Vegeta realizes that he sees a lot of great potential in not only Kaba, but in the Universe 6 Saiyans in general. They may not be the same Saiyans that he grew up with, but he's happy to realize that Saiyans prospered somewhere, that the Saiyan race was not to be underestimated. After all, he was right to be proud of them. He's trying to be a stern father figure, acting like a disciplinary magnet, just trying to get Kaba to just shape up and be the Saiyan he was meant to be, a leader. Because remember, Kaba's a Saiyan elite, even though he might not look it. One may wonder actually if this is all as some kind of method of compensation for having been so lackluster and really bad when future Trunks first showed up back in the Cell Saga. Or maybe just in general that it's not just his children, but Saiyan hybrids as a whole can't really interact with him in the same way that full-bodied Saiyans can. But that's a topic that we can go into a little bit more in a future discussion. But one thing I am really happy about is the fact that Vegeta has another reason to fight in the tournament, and his whole thing with Toppo made us realize that especially, that he is fighting for everything that he holds dear, whereas Toppo eschewed it, and Vegeta managed to teach someone a lesson that didn't necessarily involve punching people. Well, okay, it did involve punching people a little bit, but it was mostly emotional morale boosting. But let's turn that sweetness into sour and villainy with the likes of Frieza, because, like it or not, he did have quite a few relationships because, in a way, it was less loving and more scheming. Even though I was a little bit skeptical to begin with, I think bringing back the likes of Frieza was ultimately a good idea. Not only has he really gotten some cool action sequences throughout the tournament and being used quite well, he also has developed somewhat to the point where some people could actually root for him and support the guy and not feel like that, why am I supporting the bad guy? Because now he's become an anti-villain almost? And that in turn allows us for having some really interesting character interactions that we might not have had before, but thought about constantly in our minds and on blogs and in fan fictions. It does provide some really interesting plot points for the likes of Universe 7 and how he interacts with the rest of his team. But we have to get to the main relationship that Frieza had, and that was with the likes of Frost, his counterpart from Universe 6. You get a student, and you get a student, and you get a student, everyone gets a student! It's funny that not many people have actually realized that the relationship that Frost and Frieza had was more like a master-student rather than allies. And yes, Frost didn't actually realize this until it was too late. His willingness and enthusiasm to try and impress Frieza was ultimately his undoing and meant that he not only got exited from the tournament, but he also got erased entirely before the rest of his team did. It just goes to show that if you want to be successful as Frieza's pupil, then you have to be smarter and more strategic than the likes of Frost here. Basically, don't do that. And then we can actually branch away from Frost, but realize that after all the rhetoric and anti-monkey sentiments, he kind of has a soft spot for some of them, but one of them in particular, Gohan. And I've got to say that this was probably one of the most unexpected team-ups to come out of the Tournament of Power. Frieza and Gohan. What? And yes, I know a lot of people were really disappointed with the likes of episode 124, myself included, but it actually did have some cool moments between Frieza and Gohan, which were actually started and conceived back in the days of episode 108. You see, while Frieza is an evil scheming sociopath, he actually seems to get on relatively well with the likes of Gohan for some reason. At least well enough for Gohan to realize that it's probably better to actually work with Frieza when you're going up against the likes of ToP and Jiren, because if Gohan was a typical Saiyan, he would just say, no way, I'm not working for the likes of Frieza, but Gohan's just going like, yeah, it's probably for the best. Frieza is surprisingly patient and respectful towards the son of Goku. And I also don't think that he's mocking Gohan's leadership tactics either, because remember, Gohan was the leader of the Universe 7 team. And I think the important thing to remember here is that we have to look back at the last two interactions that Gohan had with Frieza. They were totally different. They weren't very impressive for Gohan because he basically got curb stomped, but not this time. In fact, he's even openly and fairly threatened to Frieza that if he tries any funny stuff, he will throw him out of the ring personally. And I think Frieza, who as a creature is actually built around mutation and adaptation to their surroundings, is somewhat impressed by Gohan's bravery and backchat. He might have realized that Gohan, out of the three Saiyans that he interacts with the most, actually has developed the most out of the three, because Goku's just the same as he was before, Vegeta was the same as before, but Gohan, that boy, Gohan's actually shown some growth in Frieza's eyes. So I guess that kind of breeds a sort of, I don't know, a fellowship? And yes, I know, after the Tournament of Power is over, this fellowship is doomed to failure, but it still has to be mentioned that in a crisis such as this, Gohan can work with Frieza and work with him pretty well. Then we have Frieza and ToP, kinda. It's not over yet, because if it were, Frieza would have been knocked out of the ring. And why am I getting at this? It's because this is important for Frieza's character. Frieza was bested and he didn't expect it. And yeah, the whole thing with Dispo was cute and stuff, but it wasn't really lingering. Frieza could actually counter that. But with ToP, it made him realize something. He thought that he'd actually managed to negate destructive energy, and ToP was more than happy to show the full force of the God of Destruction, especially when they are angry. Due to the dramatic change he saw in the likes of ToP, Frieza might be fascinated to become a God of Destruction himself, to truly harness this power and to never be humiliated again. Now I'm going to be talking about two characters who didn't have quite as many in-depth relationship developments as the other characters, but I really needed to mention them. First off is Android 17 and his relationship with his team. Yeah, we don't need to go into too much detail with him and his sister because, yeah, they are built to work together. But 17's strengths not only improved his actual strength, but it's also improved the strength of his mind, especially when it's like against Frieza, Piccolo, and Gohan, because the 17 of old was a very brash teenager, whereas now, he's actually matured. And ultimately, this proved for 17 to become the true MVP of Team Universe 7. 17 is the perfect aid to everyone, willing to take risks, unflappable in the depths of despair. In terms of numbers, Vegeta and Goku have the upper hand, but when it comes to actual performance, 17's got them licked. We couldn't round up this discussion by not talking about this guy. Not from Universe 6 or 7, but from Universe 11, and I'm talking, of course, about Jiren. Lately, we've seen some actual hashtag emotional Jiren, with him softening up to the likes of Goku and Vegeta. And why is he, in the eyes of some people, boring? Well, I see two reasons. First, we know that he is a good guy, but at the same time, he also shows elements of being an antagonist, or somewhat of an obstacle, like he's just a barrier rather than a person. And I think that's the actual doing of the writers, because if he was actually written to be likable, or we can actually relate to him, we might be actually ending up cheering against the protagonist. Like, we want Goku and Vegeta to lose because Jiren's so cool. And we're sort of seeing that in the manga in some way. And the second reason is because Jiren doesn't want to get attached to anyone, because if he did, then it would make the whole thing about participating in this tournament much harder. He is trying to be the paragon of neutrality. But nevertheless, Goku and Vegeta are making it really hard for him to try and keep to that, and as we saw at the episode 126, that's pretty much gone now. But then at the same time, we might actually see the opening that our Saiyans need in order to actually beat Jiren. So yeah, here we go. Those were some of the big relationships I thought really changed or actually became a thing throughout this entire arc. So what do you guys think? Did you like this list, or do you think there are more relationships that I should have talked about in this video and maybe in the future? I believe there are quite a few of them, but just too many for this video. Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!